Mr. Justine, and he's the one who's going to tell us and talk about details of processes and systems that have been designed, and Anurag Sab essentially mentioned them. Then before Justin Saab starts, let me kind of very quickly introduce him. He belongs to 1999 batch of the Indian Foreign Service. Government of India appointed him as the first secretary to head the newly constituted Development Cooperation Wing in the Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka. And there he served for a period of 3 years, 2011 to 2014, and was in charge of coordination of the relief, rehabilitation, and development of war-affected areas in Sri Lanka. One of the 50 projects implemented during his tenure in Sri Lanka was the Indian housing project involving construction of 50,000 houses. And he has a long and very interesting story to tell because it was the systems and the procedures which were designed which made this project a highly successful project. So over to you, Justin Sir.
Oh, thank you very much, Kirtee sir, and to all the staff of INHAF for giving me an opportunity to speak on the Indian housing project in Sri Lanka. Respected High Commissioner, Sri Gopal Bagle sir, respected Srimati Sujata Mehta madam, my friend Sri Anurag Srivastava ji, former CG of Jaffna, Sri Mahalingam sir, who is also attending this program, Sri Janaka from NHDA, Mrs. Aziza from UN Habitat, Jaime from EU, Dr. Partha, and all the participants, and also 2 beneficiaries have also joined today. All the participants who are attending this very productive and informative webinar which has been organized by INHAF. Good evening to you all. I was closely associated with this project as the head of the Development Cooperation Wing. As Sri Anurag Srivastava had mentioned, a new wing was established in the High Commission, and I was posted as the first secretary of the Development Cooperation Wing to head that wing. And I joined in 2011 and then worked for full 3 years and oversaw the implementation of the project, particularly this owner-driven project. And I thought that I would share my experiences on how this program was implemented till it's completed. And I have a brief presentation to make. One second. So we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Indian Housing Project, which was launched in 2012. And we are going to see the systems and procedures that were actually adopted for implementing this major project. Before going into the presentation, I would like to just briefly give you an outline of the presentation. We are going to just discuss the background and challenges faced by the project team before the commencement of the project, how an operations manual was prepared, how we mapped the agencies with the banks and the villages where the beneficiaries were to construct their houses, how the beneficiaries were actually selected, because that was a very, very crucial element for the successful implementation of the project, how the project was implemented by the beneficiaries, the role played by the mission, implementing agencies and banks, how the project was monitored, how there was a mid-course evaluation done for evolving better strategies, and what are the actions taken to reduce the cost of construction, and the various strategies that we adopted to ensure the completion of the project. And of course, finally, the key takeaways for future replication of this model elsewhere in any part of the world. So before moving to the project implementation, I just give you a brief background about the situation at that point of time when the project took off there was acute poverty as people lost their savings during the final phase of the war. There were also major livelihood challenges. Unemployment was very rampant. There was acute shortage of labor, both skilled labor and unskilled labor, because construction of houses requires a large volume of labor that was missing at the time of initiating the project. Motivation level of the beneficiaries was very low because most of them have had lost lives in their family and also property during the final phase of the conflict. Demining was a major issue which had to be undertaken in 4 districts where the project had to be implemented. And of course, poor road, poor connectivity. There was practically no power at that point of time. Roads were all mud roads. So the infrastructure was very poor. So for the project managers, there were major challenges for implementing this project. One, we had a time frame of 3 years, and the project had to be implemented on an owner-driven model, where the money had to be given to the beneficiaries in 4 installments. That is for 1 lakh for construction of the foundation, 2 lakh for construction of the walls, 2 lakhs for completing the roof, and 50,000 for final finishing, including painting. That is how it was planned. It is all Sri Lankan rupees. Identifying the most eligible beneficiaries was a crucial component of the project, and handling the most vulnerable families, particularly the women-headed families, widows, child-headed families, physically disabled families, was very, very crucial for us for successful completion of the project. Also, every beneficiary had a file in the mission, and every beneficiary was given a unique ID number by which we can track the beneficiary. So handling 50,000 files in the mission and processing payment in 4 installments also was a big challenge. Apparently, this was, I think, the first DBT project initiated by Government of India through MEA. And monitoring the construction of every beneficiary in different parts of the conflict-affected districts became a major challenge. Of course, trainings had to be organized for the communities to impart various skills. Bulk procurement of raw material was also taken up to reduce the cost of construction. We also foresaw a shortage of labor and construction material because there was a lot of demand and supply factors in play, and we did not want an inflation to happen in the construction material. So we had to stagger the release of funds and also stagger the identification of beneficiaries in every village. And of course, handling the migration of beneficiaries who are planning to move abroad or who are planning to sell their houses. These were all some of the challenges which we foresaw before the start of the project. So what we thought was we will prepare an operations manual. Of course, it was a major task where the help of UN agencies and also IFRC, Red Cross, was taken to prepare a very elaborate operations manual that would give some sort of a guidance to the beneficiaries on what are the eligibility to get into the scheme, how to sign an agreement, what is the mode of payment, what are the design of houses which a beneficiary can choose. Of course, the operations manual had 10 designs, engineering and architectural designs, from which the beneficiary can choose one. Of course, we had also given the freedom to the beneficiary to choose a design of their choice, provided the plinth area should be about 550 square feet. And also this operations manual served as a guide to facilitate the agencies, implementing agencies, and also to guide the officials of the Indian High Commission as also the government of Sri Lanka, and also to guide the banks who are involved in transferring the funds to the beneficiaries, and also the mechanism to address grievances that comes from the beneficiaries and other public and civil society groups. So this operations manual took almost 8 months to complete. And of course, my friend Anurag Srivastava played a major role. And Kirtee Shah was also there to finalize this operations manual. One doubt we had was whether to pay this amount after physical measurement. And at that point of time, Kirtee Shah came in, and then he told that this cannot be done because it would be practically difficult to start measuring each work and start releasing the payment. So we had decided at that point of time to give this amount upfront. So before every stage of construction, the amount would be transferred to the beneficiary. So thank you, Kirtee Shah. In that way, I think you played a major role to ensure that there is no hitch up from the financial point of view. So this operations manual, once it was prepared, we circulated this operations manual widely to all the implementing agencies and government officials so that they have an idea of how this project should be taken forward. The next major task was who will do what work where. So we had actually mapped the areas where these 4 implementing agencies, that is UN Habitat, National Housing Development Authority, International Federation of Red Cross, and Habitat for Humanity. So these 4 agencies had to be mapped in different districts, and also the banks. So a mapping was done in such a way that everyone knew that my work area is, these are the districts where I have to focus. So once this was done, then we decided that the criteria for beneficiaries to be designed. And of course, he has to be a citizen of Sri Lanka, and he should not have a permanent house in his name or any name of his family member anywhere in Sri Lanka. And he should not have got any beneficiary directly or indirectly under any permanent housing assistance scheme. And he should have been a permanent resident or native of the village where he proposes to construct the house. And of course, he should have all the required documents, land documents, sale deed, lease deed, and so on, which is duly authenticated by the divisional secretary. These were some of the essential criteria. And then we designed an objective criteria for selecting the beneficiaries. Because at that point of time, in Minik Farm alone, there were about 3 lakh families who were actually camped. And then there was a lot of demand for houses. And then we had to identify the most vulnerable families. So we had designed objective criteria. So the first criteria was the livelihood criteria. So whoever, whichever family was headed by the child or a disabled family member or a women, single women, they would be getting 30 points. An elderly headed family or female headed family will get 20 points. And if there is a male headed family, he will get 10 points. So the weightage given was 0.25. Then if the number of dependents were more than 3, the family was given 30 points. If it was between 2 to 3, it was given 20 points. And if it was only 1 dependent, then it was given 10 points, for which the weightage was 0.2. Similarly, if the family member had any physically or mentally disabled family members, if there are 2 or more family members who are physically or mentally disabled, then they got 30 points. And if there was only 1 physically or mentally disabled family member, they got 20 points. The weightage given was 0.2. And if the age of the children were less than 12 years, then they got 30 points. And if the family had children between age 12 to 18, then they got 20 points, for which the weightage given was 0.18. And the year of displacement, if there was a displacement after April 2008, that means they were affected during the final phase of the war. So they got 20 points. And if they had left the place before April 2008, they were given 10 points and the weightage for displacement was 0.12. And if the person or the family was residing in a hut or under tarpaulin sheets, they got 20 points. And if they were residing in a semi-permanent or transitional shelter, they got 10 points and the weightage was 0.05. So a family could maximum get 28.3, but we fixed a criteria of 10. So any family who got 10 marks and above became eligible to join the housing program. Now the next process was the selection of beneficiaries. So for which we had elaborate discussions with the government of Sri Lanka officials. There was a presidential task force established by the president. So we had close a relation with them to identify the areas which needed the housing, the areas which were most affected by the war. And within that village, a master list of beneficiaries who were resident of the villages were prepared by the divisional secretary, indicating the details of family, head of family member, date of birth, address, ID, if any, dependents, resettlement details, type of land title, permits if they have any, details of assistance received earlier, and all these details were collected from the master list of beneficiaries. Then once the master list was given to the High Commission, we approved it, and thereafter every house to house verification was done through the implementing agencies. And this, under the scoring mechanism, the families were identified as whether they would become eligible to join the scheme or not. So once the list of beneficiaries who have scored 10 and above in a particular village was identified, then that list of beneficiaries would be sent by the implementing agency, duly authenticated by the divisional secretary, and that would be then approved by the mission. And then this would be placed in public places to ensure that there is no controversy in selection of beneficiaries and to make the process more transparent. And we gave 14 days time to ensure that if there is any grievance from any families in a particular village on being left out, then they can represent it either directly to the High Commission or to the implementing agency or to the divisional secretary. And then once the grievance petitions are received, then we organize meetings to address such grievances, and then the finalized beneficiary list for every village was then approved by the mission. So this is how we displayed our list of beneficiaries. This is some of the village office where the public can go and see whether their name is included and whether any details in their family was missed out. All those particulars were checked, and if they felt they were some injustice had happened in the selection of beneficiaries, they had been given the right to give their grievance to the High Commission. Then we had to prepare beneficiary files. So every beneficiary had a particular file. Every beneficiary was given a unique ID number, which had the application form. They had to sign an agreement. It was a tripartite agreement between the beneficiary, implementing agency, and the village officer. And also the beneficiary had to provide the proof of ownership of the land and the damage assessment report, copy of the bank passport. So every beneficiary was asked to take a bank account from the nearest bank of their choice, and of course the bill of quantities. They can decide on the designs which was available in the operations manual, and then once that was approved, in the High Commission we scrutinize these files, and then we make a final list of advice to the bank to transfer the amount to the beneficiaries. We make it in an Excel form. We encrypt it to ensure that it doesn't get leaked out. And then we had identified 5 banks, which were actually Indian banks, which were functioning in Sri Lanka. One was the State Bank of India, We had Indian Bank, Indian Overseas Bank, Axis Bank, and ICICI Bank. So there was an just like we have online transfer mechanism in Sri Lanka, they call it SLIPS, Sri Lankan Interbank Payment System. So through that, the money gets transferred instantly once the advice from the mission reaches the bank. And for the second and further installments, the IA had to visit the project site, take the photo of the construction along with the family member holding the ID card, and then they would actually request for the next installment of funds. And once the next installment request comes, again the earlier file had to be taken, and then we process the beneficiary file for payment of next installment. So every time we transfer the amount to the beneficiaries, we inform the beneficiaries through SMS, so that the beneficiaries come to know that this amount of 1 lakh or 2 lakh or 50,000 in different installment reaches their account. And we also ensured that, because there was no banking facility in interior area, so a mobile ATM facility was also provided, so that the mobile ATM keeps moving into the interior areas where the beneficiary can actually take the required amount. Then the banks actually report back to the High Commission on the transfer of funds. Reconciling accounts with the banks takes place on a daily basis. And the bank also deputes every week one officer to check whether all the funds have been transferred. Many a times what happens, due to errors in the name of the account holder or in the account number, sometimes there would be bouncing of funds back to the banks, our banks. So all these things had to be reconciled and then rectified. Then once that is done, then the IA actually and the banks verify whether the houses are being constructed. Of course, the IA had to do house-wise. Every house they had to verify. But for the banks, we had given a target of 5%. So randomly, they will go and check and then keep reporting to the High Commission. And then the master list of beneficiaries paid would be shared with the implementing agency, so that they also reconcile with the beneficiaries in the field and then confirm that yes, the amount has been transferred into the bank account of the beneficiaries. So in the High Commission, there were two processes, because it was a 4 installment process. So every time we have, for a first beneficiary, you have to prepare a file afresh. But for the subsequent installments, you have to retrieve the file. So there is a process of merging the new documents and retrieving the old files. So we had planned a mechanism by which every agency will know when they have to come to the High Commission. Because if everyone comes to the High Commission, there would be chaos. So everyone knows, all the 4 agencies knows that this is the day and this is the time when they will have to come to High Commission for merging the files. And this is the day when the High Commission will take the files from the store. So this schedule was also established. Then the next procedure was the monitoring. So there were different levels of monitoring. One was the monitoring by the mission. So of course, mission had to monitor closely. And the major task was to ensure that the payments moved fastly, because if we start delaying the payments, that is going to affect the progress of work. So the motivation level of the beneficiary depends on the speed at which the mission makes the payment. So that was very crucial. So every time we receive the file, we ensure that within 2 weeks, the amount gets transferred into the bank account of the beneficiary. And we also examine bounce back cases, scrutinize files for payment. We also attend to grievances from the beneficiaries. We also undertake site inspections. We also meet IAs every fortnight to review the progress of work. And also we have regular meetings with the Presidential Task Force and also with the government agents, the district magistrates or the collectors, as we call here. They are called as government agents in Sri Lanka, and also with the divisional secretaries. We organize periodic meetings to ensure that their support is also there, because for organizing construction material at low cost. Otherwise, there was a lot of hoarding happening in different parts of the villages. So, in order to streamline all those things, the support of the Sri Lankan government officials were very, very crucial, and the success of the project could not have happened but for the support of the Sri Lankan officials. Also, the monitoring by the Consul General's office in Jaffna. Of course, the Consul General and the team at that point of time, Mr. Mahalingam sir was there. He is also attending this program today. They played a major role in site inspection, because the predominantly out of the 50,000 houses, close to about 40,000 houses were built in the northern province, which was the worst affected province. And so, Consul General being situated in Jaffna, they played a major role in periodic inspections and also reporting wherever intervention of the High Commission was required. As also the monitoring by the implementing agency. Implementing agency had their own team of technical officers and also community mobilizers. So they go house to house, they have a program chart, and then they have established a logbook in which every visit would be recorded by the IA, and also the progress of the beneficiary would be recorded. Monitoring by banks, that also happened simultaneously as per an agreement signed between the High Commission and the banks. And their banks also submit their report to the mission once a quarter. And of course, once a quarter, a team from Government of India, usually headed by the Secretary DPA, keeps coming to Sri Lanka to evaluate the progress of work. So, monitoring happened in different forms and different ways, and that was very, very crucial and critical for the success of the project. So these are some of the monitoring meetings happening. So on the left side was a meeting chaired by the PTF, Presidential Task Force head, Mr. Divaratane. Towards the right, there was some review meetings conducted in villages by the High Commission officials. Down below, we see the experts from the Government of India and also senior officials from the MEA who keep coming once a quarter to evaluate the progress of the project. Now, challenges faced during execution. So once the project took off, it was almost set on an autopilot mode. So once the beneficiaries started receiving money, they were so hungry to start building the houses at the earliest. So everyone started constructing at the same point of time, immediately when they received the funds. So in many villages, what we saw was there was shortage of construction material, and of course, skilled labor was also a big challenge, resulting in inflation. There was a hike in cost of the labor as well as construction material. So this was immediately sensed by the mission, and we took corrective measures immediately. That also helped in a major way. A beneficiary contribution to complete the house. Many of the beneficiaries found it difficult to complete the house with 5.5 lakh rupees. Of course, we had prepared this estimate based on the assumption that there should be some contribution from the beneficiary as well, maybe in the form of labor or in their form of the raw materials which they would have already had from their earlier damaged house. So some beneficiaries found difficulties in completing the house, and we had to intervene to ensure that these beneficiaries, vulnerable beneficiaries, had to be supported. And also the struggling beneficiaries, particularly the widows, women-headed families, the child-headed families, elderly-headed families, they found difficulties in progressing with the house. And such cases were referred to the implementing agencies, who took special care to ensure that these beneficiaries are able to move forward and give pace to the project. And eventually everyone completed the house. And one problem which we faced immediately after the initiation of the project was many of the families had taken loans from their banks. So whenever we transfer the money to their bank accounts, the bank started deducting the amount in lieu of their existing loans. So once the IEA implementing agencies start reporting this, then we did two things. One is to refer to the management, the bank management, that please refund this amount because this is a grant from the government of India. Also, we insisted that the beneficiaries should open new accounts. It should not be an existing account. So quickly we did that. And this ensured that this problem was solved. And many a times the beneficiaries also had their own superstitious beliefs to start the house or to complete the house. They had their own auspicious time. And of course, monsoon was also very heavy, particularly the northeast monsoon in Sri Lanka. Almost 3-4 months get lost during the construction period. These were all challenges faced during the time of execution. And handling cases involving migration or death of beneficiaries. That was also a huge challenge before us. And of course, land disputes and demining. Whenever the work starts, then there would be some blast or some mines detected, and then that had to be corrected or referred to the army there. And then that also was a big challenge for the mission. But then when the projects took off and then almost a year was completed, we thought that, okay, we had done whatever possible from the mission to rectify whatever possible. And then we thought that, okay, 1 year is over exactly. We will have a midterm evaluation. So we called beneficiaries who have completed the house. We called implementation agencies, officials. We invited the officials from the government of Sri Lanka and also experts from India, including our Kirtee Shah. And then we had a detailed workshop there in Jaffna. And we came up with a lot of suggestions to take the project forward. One was to undertake large-scale trainings for the master mason, because there was a huge shortage of master mason. And also to give training to the communities by pooling family labor and also for bulk purchase of material to reduce the cost of construction. Also, we designed a lot of strategies to reduce the cost of construction. And IAs were instructed to ensure that the beneficiaries recycle salvage building material, which they were already having, and also to go for precast door and window frames in lieu of timber, and also to prevent wastage of material, and also to reduce the wall length from 10 meters to 9 meters, and also to convince the beneficiary that you restrict the plinth area to 550 square feet, complete the house, and then if they want a bigger house, they can always go for an extension. And also to go for low-cost smoke-free chimney, and insist on gable roof instead of hip roof, because that is more cheaper, and also advocate fair-faced masonry to reduce the cost of construction. And also to improve the strength of the house, the experts from Government of India and architects had suggested that detailing and tying of roof was very much required, because the northern province was prone to cyclones, and it should not happen that the roof flies away in the next cyclone. So the IAs were specifically instructed that tying of roof had to be done, and also the timber that was used for roofing had to be treated properly before being used, and also to install water harvesting structures to actually help in groundwater level. And the lady who is speaking in the photo was the story which Kirtee Shah ji just referred. She was from Pudukudi Iripu, widow, who actually informed the gathering that she completed the house in spite of a lot of challenges. She lost her husband and both her sons. She and her daughter alone were there. And she told the gathering that she was also almost decided that she would take her life. But then this house project came, and when she got this amount, there was a new hope in her life. So that story only our Kirtee sir just referred before our talk. And then we calculated during that midterm evaluation as to how much amount can be reduced or saved by undertaking various cost reduction strategies. And then this was actually passed on to our implementing agencies. Now, we had to have a continuous connect with the beneficiaries. They had to feel that someone is there to take care of them and also to guide them. So we had our own innovations in the form of flyers, leaflets to guide the beneficiaries to adopt appropriate measures and suitable alternative material to reduce construction cost. We also had a weekly program every Thursday in an FM radio to guide the beneficiaries on various strategies which they can adopt to construct the houses within the available assistance. We also had a hotline call center which was operating in all working days to address the grievances from the beneficiaries, and of course regular field visits by the technical officers, field engineers, and also the community mobilizers ensured that there was a continuous connect with the beneficiaries. Community meetings were always conducted with the civil society groups and beneficiaries, and also with special focus on women-headed and physically disabled headed families. And every family who was a beneficiary had to maintain a logbook, and every work which they undertook had to be mentioned in the logbook, and which provided a guidance both to the IA and to the beneficiary on what they should do. And finally, we had our own established SMS mechanism by which the beneficiaries were asked to take note of SMS regularly, and then see if any funds were received, and then use the funds at the earliest. And of course, mobile ATMs were engaged. These were some of the crucial initiatives. We requested the beneficiary, because many of them lived in very big houses. But when this project came, they were actually initially they were actually not happy with this 550 square feet. But this being a project on a very large scale, we had to convince them that yes, you please go ahead and complete this 550 square feet. And with this amount, that is 5.5 lakh rupees at an average of 1,000 rupees per square feet. Then timely release of funds. That was a huge task from the mission. Development Cooperation Wing played a major role to ensure that the funds were released within 14 days. Many times we try to release within a week to keep up the momentum of the project. We also ensured that periodic follow-up was taken up with the beneficiaries who are struggling to move forward. And we also recommended innovative low-cost construction methodologies to the beneficiaries, continuous monitoring by the technical officers and community mobilizers. Trainings to the communities were given periodically, insisting on joint bank accounts with spouses. That played a very major role. In fact, many of the beneficiaries in the initial stage, we had issues because the money was not properly spent. So quickly we realized that a joint account model will actually help. So wherever spouses were there, we ensured that the wife is also became a party to the bank account, or wherever widow is there, widow along with the her child would be a joint bank account holder. And also we informed the banks not to debit the funds in lieu of their existing loans, which almost all the banks agreed to, and they refunded the amounts which they debited. And of course, the flow of communication and the release of funds. Key takeaways. Of course, the selection of the most vulnerable families was a major task, because we were very sure that unless the beneficiaries were selected rightly, the project is not going to succeed. So this was a very important task. There was a lot of pressure, but still we withstood the pressure and ensured that the most vulnerable families were alone selected. Minor architectural interventions like reducing the height of the wall by 1 foot saved rupees 25,000. Similarly, a lot of such suggestions were given to the beneficiaries periodically. We also advocated family labor and pooling of community labor. That also created some sort of a community building in the locality, particularly in Jaffna and Kilinochirol. I remember that a group of 10 or 15 families joined together, and then they will start working on one house. All the family members will work for one house, complete that house, move to the next house. All the 15 family members will work for the second house, and then they keep moving and complete it. So it was a wonderful cooperative effort by the beneficiaries. Bulk procurement of raw material from wholesale dealers was undertaken by IAs and also such cooperative communities. Contributions from beneficiaries in the form of labor, savings, timber from their homesteads were also recommended to ensure that the house got completed. We also advise avoiding wastage of raw materials and reuse of raw materials which are already available in the site. Timely release of funds. Mission had to release about 1,72,000 transactions, and staggered release of funds for different stages within a village to avoid shortage of labor. This was a mechanism adopted by the mission. We ensured that there is no inflation in a particular village. So once a master list of beneficiaries was identified, we did not release the funds to all the beneficiaries at one point of time, because we knew that there was no labor to cater to the requirements of all the beneficiaries in a particular village. So all the beneficiaries would be covered, but in stages. So we staggered the support to different beneficiaries in a particular village. So 523 villages were covered at the end of the project. And he was identified as the first beneficiary who completed the project. And this has been actually covered by Sri Anurag Srivastava. And this project, as we mentioned earlier, in the process of building houses, communities were established. And the major hallmark of this project was that there was no allegation or complaints, since the houses were built by the owners and funds were transferred to the beneficiaries directly, and therefore it was a 100% corrupt-free project. Thank you. Thank you very much.